I remember I went on a trip one time with a friend. Now, at that time in my life, I had two guys who were really good friends, but the three of us didn't really hang out very much together. So let's call one friend Friend A. I hung out with Friend A the most because he lived close to me. I wasn't driving yet. None of us were driving at that point. So I just naturally hung out with Friend A more. So I was getting a lot closer to Friend A. Now, Friend B, I had been friends with much longer than Friend A, but he moved a little far away. So I saw him a lot less. So our friendship was drifting a little bit at that point. But it came summer. And because it was summer, I was hanging out with Friend A like all the time. But Friend B called me up and said, I want to invite you to go on a trip with me for a week up to this lake with me and my family. And I thought, that'd be great. I'd have a great time. It'd be fun to be with him. I haven't gotten to see him. It sounded really fun. I got ready to go. Now, you have to understand with Friend A, we really had a bromance going on. Like, we were really close. And when we left, and I took off for that trip, I remember him saying, hey, make sure you contact me. Make sure you write me a letter. Make sure you call. Like, that was back in the day when we actually wrote letters. And it was before cell phones. It was before texting. There was no way to contact each other except by writing a letter or by picking up a landline phone and making a call. So went off on the trip. And as I got up there and I realized, even if I wrote a letter, the trip wasn't that long, that it would actually take more time to write the letter and get back to the friend than I would take to get back home. So I thought writing a letter doesn't really make sense. There was one small problem with making a call. The problem is we went up to a lake, but we stayed on a houseboat the whole entire time. So we were out literally in the middle of the lake. And obviously I didn't call the day that we left because it was the first day we were gone and we were up there driving and we really didn't even have a chance. I couldn't call when we were on the lake. When we came back to the dock, technically could have called at that point, but we were cleaning up, packing up the car, and driving back. So there really was no chance to call. So I come back home, and obviously Friend A is really upset because it was not just like a friend. It was like that bromance going on, and he was mad. And we had promised, right? I had promised to write or call or contact him, and I didn't. So I technically broke my word. Now, on my behalf, I think I was okay because I was in the middle of a lake, and I even tried to explain that. I said, we were on a houseboat. Like, we lived on the water. There was no way to call you. I'm really sorry. But that's just all I could do is I thought of you, right? Like, I wanted to write. I wanted to call. I just couldn't call. And what's interesting is he wouldn't let it go. He wouldn't let it go. And he was really, really hurt. Because why? I had promised. And the point we get to in the Sermon on the Mount today for this week is it has this implication of keeping your word, of keeping a promise. And even though maybe that friend wasn't really fair to me, of getting so upset, at the same time, it shows how much he valued somebody's word. It showed how much he valued a promise. And that when you do break a promise, when you don't keep your word, it should be a big deal. And I wasn't trying to not make it a big deal, but he made it a really big deal. And it is a really big deal. Jesus will go on to explain why, but I want to read the passage out of Matthew chapter 5 first. Jesus said this, again, that you've heard it said long ago, that people said, don't break your oath, but to fulfill to the Lord the vows that you have made. But I tell you, don't swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by earth, for it is his footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it's the city of the great king. And don't swear by your head, for you cannot even make one hair on your head white or black. All you need to say is just yes or no. And anything beyond this actually comes from the evil one. Now, what's interesting to me, if I read through the Beatitudes, I read through the Sermon on the Mount, there are big issues that are being talked about. Attitudes about finding joy or not, ways of following God or not, being salt or light, and the illustrations of that, really emotional things like marriage and divorce and murder and hate. But Jesus comes pretty early on to this idea of oaths. And it doesn't really make that much sense to me. It seems like it just doesn't fit. Because what's the big deal with an oath? But it should be a big deal. And oaths actually come in a way that we show integrity because we keep our word, because we don't lie, because we hold up promises. But oaths in that time had actually become a polite way to lie. It's a way that you could swear by something, but actually just not have to say, no, I don't want to do it. So here's an example. And when I lived in Morocco, all my friends were Muslim in Morocco. So, and they speak Arabic. And so one of the things that would often happen is they would say, Inshallah, if God wills. Now, my apologies to my Muslim friends, because I'm not sure if this is across the board, but at least in Morocco, when someone would say, Inshallah, if God wills, it was actually a polite way most of the time, not all the times, but most of the times for them to say, I don't want to do it, but let's put it on God. And if God wills, it'll happen. But if he doesn't will, then it's just not going to happen. But if you ask me personally, I don't really want to do it. So an example would be if I went up to my friend and I said, hey, do you want to wake up early and go running tomorrow? And they would say, oh, Steve, inshallah, right? Like if God wills, which probably meant, I like you a lot, Steve. You're my friend. I don't want to hurt your feelings. So I don't really want to say no. But I don't want to wake up early and go running. Who would? Only crazy people like you. So if God wills, so if God really wants me to wake up early, God will wake me up early in some miraculous way, and it will be so clear to me that I will know God wants me to run with you, and I will trudge myself out of bed, walk over to the house you're staying in, and we'll go jogging. That's why Jesus said, let your yes be yes and let your no be no. If you really don't want to go running, just say, no thanks, or say, how about later in the day, or just say, I'm not a runner, right? But a lot of times oaths had become like that, a way to technically lie without just saying yes or no. And back then, you could swear by all of the things that Jesus talked about. So if you go back to the passage, remember he said you could swear by heaven, you could swear by earth, you could swear by God, you could swear by yourself. And so it's almost like saying, I promise, right? Like I promise on my mother's grave, if you've ever heard phrases like that. And so you're swearing against something to try to bring validity to the fact that you are absolutely telling the truth. I promise, I swear on my own life. And so that's sort of what was happening. And through all of these things, when you got to actually swearing or making an oath by God, you need to be serious. So that's why sometimes people would even make it look serious when actually it wasn't the truth. So all of these things link back to our words, and they link back to our actions. And the fact that our actions are going to back up our words, and our words are going to coincide with our actions, that we become people of integrity, people who do what they said they were going to do and say what they're going to do. There's no deception, there's no trickery, there's no manipulation at all. So it really just boils down to if we're truthful, if we're honest, if we're loving in our speech, if we're people of integrity. That's why Jesus said, keep your word, basically. In Matthew 23, he says, let your yes be yes, let your no be no. That's the whole concept here, is just be honest. Because if you're not, it doesn't reflect well on you. It doesn't reflect well on your faith. It doesn't reflect well on God. It's going back to friend A getting really upset because I didn't do what I said I was going to do. And so that's why Jesus brings up oaths right after he brings up something like divorce or like murder. And then he goes to oaths. How in the world do these relate? They're not even on the same page with one another. But actually for Jesus, they are. Because when you deceive people, when you are not somebody of integrity, when you let people down, it reflects so poorly on us. It reflects so poorly on God. So Jesus wants us to understand the importance of our words and the importance of our promises. And if you can't fulfill a promise, then don't even say you will. Just say no. But if you say yes, you need to do it. Let your yes be yes and let your no be no. Don't make oaths that you can't keep because it reflects poorly on you as an individual and on God. So really, what would somebody say if they had to make a judgment call on our beliefs based on what we say and based on what we do? Because the same thing is true, is that it matters to God because they would be saying the same thing about God. That if I was continually letting people down, why would anybody ever believe what I'm trying to say or do about faith in God if I simply can't be trusted? What are friends in your life who have let you down and have broken trust and have even gossiped or said things about you? And then what if later you found out they said they love God, they follow Jesus, but then they treated you this way? Would they ever want to follow Jesus based on your actions or your words? Never. And they would be justified in doing that. And Jesus understood how important this was and how severe this was. So that's why he said, don't make oaths that you can't keep. Don't make promises that you can't keep. Don't swear by things, because it's actually just a lie. Make a yes be yes, make a no be no, and be a person of your word. Because back then, in this context, it had become way too easy to swear by things or make promises when actually you just intended to lie. But everything that we say isn't just expressed or experienced by our words, but it's expressed or experienced by our actions, and if they back up what we say. And Jesus says it matters because that will reflect on God. So I hope today you could understand just the importance of this passage of Jesus talking about keeping our oaths, of keeping our word, because of the impact it has on our integrity as followers of Jesus. God bless.